combining perfectionism with time constraints gets rid of the negative sides of perfectionism. So first of all, what is perfectionism? Perfectionism often has a negative connotation if it's used by people who want it to have a negative connotation, and sometimes it has a positive connotation, and it means the drive to do better, basically. But most often it is used with this slightly negative connotation. This means you cannot stop. You fail to see, basically, when it's enough, when the improvement of this particular process is enough, and therefore you try to improve and improve and improve, and you never actually show this thing to the world if it's something you actually want to publish. But it also could mean that you just, basically that you are caught in this one single optimization process, but you never actually switch to other processes, and you fail to see when it's enough. But now, here's the thing. If we just assume everybody has a drive to do good, to not do good, but to improve the things we are doing, this could mean if I record a video, a very practical example, at least for me right now, I could try to optimize how I speak. I could try to optimize how I look into the camera. I could try to optimize my lighting setup. And these are all things I could try to optimize. But perfectionism then, if it has a negative connotation, would mean that I, for example, focused on one single process and tried to optimize it until never. So this could mean that I focused on my lighting setup, or focused on combing my hair, or focused on trying to better my speaking skills, trying to better my English in a way that actually doesn't get in the way of me speaking English. The problem is just, if you invest too much time into one of these processes, that you fail to see the big picture, because the more you get into one of these processes, the more your mind actually starts to get into these processes, and then overnight, for example, if you struggle to find a solution for the proper lighting setup, your subconscious actually will also help you. The more you dive into one topic, the less you see these other topics, and the less important they also seem to be. And this is Perfectionism 101. So now, how to cure perfectionism, the negative side of perfectionism, by introducing a time constraint. Time constraints are one of the biggest hacks in the world to actually get stuff done. I mean, this example of a student who has to basically submit a master thesis, for example, in 3 days. This will actually activate panic mode. And what is panic mode? It's basically activating different things in our body like adrenaline, and therefore making us work and making us stay up all night long, enabling us to actually finally do the work. The problem is just, if you then try to work 3 months in advance without the adrenaline, then you probably will fail to do so, because you are just in a different state of mind. Because you actually are in a different state of mind, and this is not something about, let's just try to be more efficient, or let's just try to be positive about this, or let's just try to be conscientious about this thing I have to do. It's about you not being able to access these hormones, or neurotransmitters, or neuromodulators. So now the problem inherently is that you don't have access to these. But what if instead you used this method of time constraints also for doing things in advance? This now actually is the hack, basically. If you combine perfectionism with a time constraint, then a time constraint can be anything that is a time. This could mean that for doing something like brushing your teeth, you only have 1 minute, and this could mean for something like a master thesis, you only have 3 months, 6 months, maybe 1 year. Actually, time constraints are all over the place. You only have a certain time until you get kicked out of a class if you fail to do the class, and then you have to repeat the class again. With class, I mean basically a level of school, elementary school or high school, which I don't know the proper word for right now. So if you, within this time, for example, fail to prepare yourself enough for a test you have to write, what happens is that you fail the test, and then the time constraint actually punishes you, basically. But without the time constraint, you often wouldn't have done the thing. So now, what you actually can do is you can take control you can try to take control of these time constraints on your own. for many people, and also for me, many years, I guess, these time constraints were something that was only external. So this means whenever I had to do something externally, when another party was involved, this could be an institution, this could be the state, this could be the school, this could be the teacher, this could be the kindergarten teacher. Whenever something else basically offers a time constraint to you, not really offering a time constraint to you, because often if you don't comply to the time constraint, what happens is that you get punished for not doing the thing within the time constraint. So now, what if instead of only using external sources for time constraints, you actually had the big idea? What if you created time constraints on your own? This now could mean, again, if you work out, for example, you have to finish anyway at some point in time. You don't have all day to work out. You also need to sleep, you need to eat, you need to work, you need to stand up, you need to brush your teeth, you just might also take some time to actually educate your children, or it depends, of course, on your life situation, but whatever is the case, things just have to be done in a certain amount of time. Now, if we have a certain amount of time for a specific thing, for a specific task we have to do, then the next question is, what would be the ideal amount of time for this specific task? Example now, if you try to work out, it doesn't really make sense to work out for 2 hours very intensively. So if you go to the gym and you actually try to do hypertrophy and actually increase your muscle size over time, and you train for 2 hours, 2 hours is just too long. It's not that 2 hours inherently is too long, it's just at a given intensity. If you constrained your time using a 1 hour time constraint, at a given intensity, you would actually get the most efficient workout. This now, I didn't quite say it or formulate it in a way that actually made huge amounts of sense. So now, let me explain it again. Let's just say you try your best anyway. This trying your best anyway is a given intensity. Now this given intensity is also dependent on the time constraint itself, and that makes it already more difficult. Because if you had 3 hours to do a workout, a given workout, for example, let's just say something very simple. Let's just say 250 crunches, 250 push-ups, and 250 pull-ups. Something most people probably can't do. Nevertheless, 250 was just in my mind. Let's just say 25 to simplify it even more. If you now have 3 hours to do these things, then you don't have to do them very efficiently. I mean, if you have the 3 hours and you do them within the 3 hours, you could make a case for this process being efficient. But the thing is, you could also use your time for something else that's called opportunity cost. So with every unit of time, you can actually use the unit of time, an hour, a minute, a day, for doing actually something else. And this is the opportunity cost. This means for example, when it comes to free time and work, with every unit of free time you spend, you can also do work. This means basically your free time now has a value because you could actually work more. Of course, there are a lot of other constraints. You cannot actually work. You can only work basically a certain amount of given. What I'm saying is that the amount of time you can work varies. And that's a scale, basically. And the scale goes from maybe a few hours a day or a few minutes a day to the maximum amount of hours you could possibly work without harming yourself in the long run. And these are very many constraints already. So without harming yourself in the long run could mean that you actually also have to work out every now and then, because otherwise, after age 25, everything basically goes down in terms of physical health. So now again, when it comes to the workout, what you actually could do is, at a given intensity, and that's basically the maximum intensity you can actually perform, given that the intensity itself and how well you actually can perform is positively influenced by the time constraint. This means the shorter the actual time constraint, the more adrenaline, for example, is released, therefore giving you an edge in actually trying to perform. This means if you add a time constraint and you only have 20 minutes for a specific workout, you could make the case that you could actually replace maybe the kind of push, the mental push you get from drinking a caffeine or a pre-workout drink before, and replace it just with the time constraint itself. Probably will take some time, but this is basically hyping yourself up. So using a time constraint like 10 minutes for these 25 push-ups, pull-ups, and crunches would be something that's useful. Of course, the time constraint cannot be too short, because if the maximum intensity you are able to perform, given all the factors that actually lead to your performance, or to your maximum intensity you can perform, to your maximum performance, and if all these things are already applied and the work is just too much, the workload is just too much, and within 1 minute you probably will not be able to do all those things. This means you have to find a time, basically a unit of time, not really a unit of time, a time constraint that actually allows you to, for one, positively influence the intensity you are able to perform at, but at the same time is just enough for doing the work, but at the same time is not so constraining that you actually either cannot do the workout, or that another factor like thoughts like doubt actually come in. And if you, for example, try to do all these things and within a certain amount of time, let's just again use the same example, and you try to do it within 1 minute, and ahead, we are not really irrational beings as humans. I mean, we try to act rational, we try to approximate rationality, but nevertheless we often fail, I guess. So therefore, if you now try to do it all in 1 minute, you already know that, at least in the past, there is no data on you performing all these things in 1 minute. This means you probably won't feel very confident about these things. This means the risk for procrastination actually increases drastically. This means that you also have to optimize for showing up, basically, when it comes to workouts. If you, for example, the time constraint and the workload you actually have to perform, or the intensity combined with the workload to actually create all of the workout, is just too much for you, and you tend to procrastinate. This means over time, all the workouts combined will be less beneficial than if you actually took a more relaxed approach and try to not constrain these things too much. Therefore, now, again, combining perfectionism, I would positively, if you only saw it positively, I would describe it as this: the inner drive to do better. And the inner drive to do better often only can work if we actually have constrained things. The biggest constraint we all have is that we probably all die. The next constraint is that with every single year, up to a certain point in time, so at a certain point in time after we basically grew up, that with every single year, our physical and therefore also correlating our mental performance just goes down. Of course, we can actually get access to more knowledge and store more knowledge in our brain and also collect experience. But as a matter of fact, if the performance, your physical performance goes down over time, your mind is also highly likely to also, the performance of your mind is also highly likely to go down over time. So now, how to use constraints to basically put perfectionism into place. By using the constraints, by thinking about what constraint would be useful, and then constraining your time. This could mean that you time block now from now till the end of time, or schedule your time. For example, I usually take an hour to record long videos like these, and then after I recorded these, I am just done with recording long videos. And if I have a great idea, I just don't record it, but instead, if it's really nice, I just put it in a task manager, and then I just pull up the task manager as you saw me read from it in the beginning, and then I just create the video at a given point in time. And I cannot record out of this time. I cannot record. Why? Because that would give me the opportunity, not really the opportunity, but the possibility to record. What if within the night, I wake up and I have this idea, do I then turn on the lights? it doesn't really make sense in the long term. Therefore, what makes sense in the long term is to set a time aside for all the things you have to do, to find the optimal time constraint that works for you over time also. Also optimizing for showing up, which is basically a simplification for if you actually get the thing done, basically for quantity instead of quality, you could also say. So now, finally, what is the final resolution? If you tend to be perfectionistic in a negative way, and you also tend to fall into the category of trying to optimize for these details, for these sub-processes, for these parts of the bigger process that just aren't useful anymore, and you think they are useful because you get into these things more and more, then by actually introducing a time constraint, you have to take a look at all the sub-processes, and you actually have to see how much time you actually want to spend on lighting, how much time you actually want to spend on creating the idea, how much time you actually want to spend on practicing English or learning English before, or maybe not.